All right, time to see what's cooking on the DK Sportsbook tonight ahead of a 6-game slate around the NBA. Here to share their best bets, we got host of the Four Seasons podcast by Ball is Life, Brian Magdziarz, RotoWire NBA editor Nick Whalen. Nick, starting with you, buddy. Which favorite do you like to cover the spread tonight?
I was surprised to see that the Brooklyn Nets are only -4 against the San Antonio Spurs. And I know San Antonio has a lot to play for. I know the Spurs are coming off of beating the Milwaukee Bucks handily in their last game, but James Harden almost certainly going to be back for this game. We just got word a couple of minutes ago that he's going to warm up with the intent to play. I think that's going to provide a spark for Brooklyn. Obviously don't expect Harden to be back to putting up, 25, 10 and 10 right away, but this is a team that doesn't have a ton of depth, and just having, a super competent MVP caliber player back in the rotation will be huge. And look, even if they don't get that much from Harden tonight, I think having Kyrie Irving, who, granted is questionable for this game after taking a hit to the face last night, but just having him and Kevin Durant against a Spurs team that, has a couple pieces that you like in DeMar DeRozan and DeJounte Murray, but, on the road, long road trip. But at the same time, I was surprised that the Nets are only 4-point favorites in this one.
What do you think, Magdziarz?
Nick, me and you both, man. I saw the -4 Brooklyn and was all over it. But you nailed everything I was going to say. Harden's a game-time decision, but he's likely going to play. Even a 2% Harden. Kyrie, no concussion last night. I'm assuming he's going to play. But even with no Harden and no Kyrie, I love KD's chances with Joe Harris and the gang to cover 4 points against the Spurs team, who's not great at basketball right now. Not to mention that this is a very meaningful game as far as seeding goes for the Brooklyn Nets. They want to get as high up as they can. So all over Brooklyn -4.
Okay. Ryan, what underdog you backing tonight against the spread?
I'm backing the Wizards +6.5. I watched the entire Hawks-Wizards game last time when Russ was stat stuffing. It was a 2-point game until the very end, where Russell Westbrook bricked a 3 which would have been a game-winning 3, and chased after the game ball in true Russell Westbrook fashion. But that's another story. The Wizards are the 10 seed, so they need this game. I just think that the fast pace of the Wizards, the Hawks looked like they had trouble matching that speed. But I like the Wizards to cover and lose, but by less than 6.5.
Nick, underdog you're backing tonight.
Yeah, that was one that I thought about. We'll see if Washington is able to kind of replicate the effort that they put in on Monday against Atlanta. But I think I like New Orleans +8 at Dallas. I mean, the Mavericks have been awful lately, and Luka Doncic has had kind of his 2 worst games of the year back to back. And I know against the Cavs he got kicked out, and that had something to do with it. But I mean, Dallas got absolutely smacked around by the Memphis Grizzlies last night, and Doncic has 0 made 3-pointers in 2 straight games, which for him is unheard of. He had at one point this year, 48 games in a row with at least 1 made 3. I don't know if he's a little banged up or just kind of in the midst of a slump at the wrong time. But, even with the injuries in New Orleans, this team has been able to kind of regroup and play fairly well without Zion and without Ingram. I think, Steven Adams has a chance to get back in the lineup tonight. So that's one that I'm keeping an eye on. And I also wouldn't be shocked if Houston is able to hang around with the Lakers, a team that I've just grown to not trust whatsoever. The Lakers, that is. You're reintegrating LeBron tonight. His minutes are going to be limited. The Lakers turned it over a ton against the Knicks last night. They do that virtually every single game. So I don't think the Lakers lose to Houston, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Rockets, are able to keep this one from getting completely out of hand.
Nick, what total tonight has your attention?
Sticking with that Rockets-Lakers game, I like the under on 224.5. Houston, as we know, very much banged up, not really interested in winning basketball games at this point in the season. The Lakers defense, even with LeBron and Davis out, was better than expected and should be even better with LeBron James back in the lineup tonight. Lakers play a lot of low-scoring games. That's how they found success last season. That's how they're going to find success if they do in the postseason. This is one of those games where if the 3-pointers aren't falling for either side, I think Houston probably ends up in the 90s and the Lakers are maybe in the low to mid 100s.
All right, Magdziarz, what about you, man?
I like over 234 for the Blazers Jazz game. Portland's red hot. They've won 4 straight. And in those 4 straight wins, they're averaging 128 points per game. The Jazz have won 3 of their last 4, and they're scoring 123 points in those last 4 games. So if my math's correct, they each need to score 117 points, and 128 and 123 is way over that. I just like the way these two teams are playing despite Conley and Mitchell being out. I think it's going to be a very meaningful game again. I think it's going to be high-powered, so I feel pretty confident about the over 234.
All right, let's go to favorite overall bet here, Ryan. So total, prop, any of that stuff in the association tonight. What do you got?
So there's a theme about this Blazers-Jazz game for me tonight. I like it. I think that this is a CJ McConnell game. Over 22.5 points is what I'm looking at for this one. In his last 2 games, he has scored 28 and 27 points. There's no Conley and no Mitchell, like I mentioned. So what I'm really looking at is who's going to guard who for Portland. Clarkson can't guard anyone. Ingles and Bojan are like their 2 guards that are going to be matched up with Dame and CJ, and the better of the 2, I would guess, is going to go guard Dame. So I think CJ has free reign to get deep in his bag tonight and try some stuff. But over 220 or over 22.5, I really like.
What about you, Nick?
I like Trae Young over 27.5 points against Washington. He had 36 in that last meeting, he had 30 in his previous game. Trae Young over 1.5 made threes as well. He's 3 of his last 22 from beyond the arc over the last 4 games. I think he's due to break out of that. The attempts, the volume have been there. I like Rudy Gobert over 14.5 points against Portland. And then finally, I like the Boston Celtics to cover 7 in Cleveland tonight. It feels like Boston needs a little momentum right now after losing Jaylen Brown, taking a couple losses back-to-back to Miami. Cleveland has extreme interest in not winning this game for lottery purposes. Everyone's really down on Boston right now. I think this is kind of a get-right game for them to try to gain some level of confidence before heading into the playoffs.
Nick, before we let you guys go, you have a favorite DFS play in the association tonight? You got Jerry over on Twitch who really needs some DFS advice.
Yeah, I'll go back to Trae Young, 9,100 against Washington. If you don't want to pay up for Russ in that game, I think he's a great pivot. Clint Capella, who had a 2020 game the other day, had 20 rebounds in that game against Washington the other day. He's at 8,600. And then a guy that Ryan mentioned, Bojan Bogdanovic at 6,900 for Utah going up against Portland. I like all 3 of those tonight.
Ryan, how about DFS play, man?
So for the first time ever, Russell Westbrook costs over $1,100. He's $12,400, which is great. And it's going to get me to pivot off of him, which I think is the main goal. So I think I'm going back to CJ. I think that this is a primetime ESPN game that he's aware of. Nobody's going to be able to guard CJ because they're going to put their main defender on Dame. I just think this is one of those nights where he goes off for 50 or 60 daily fantasy points. So not to mention he's $7,900, which a month ago he was $1,000 more costly. So I like CJ for value too.